September 1939, Germany invades Poland, the start of World War II. Prologue: Tensions on the border, the last calm before the storm. On August 25, 1939, 6 days before the outbreak of war, the border checkpoint at the village of Zagędz, near the Danzig Corridor in northern Poland, had tripled the usual number of soldiers. Tomasz Kowal, a 32-year-old customs officer, carefully inspected the cargo hold of a German truck. The driver, Hans, a man he had known for years who usually brought German chocolate for his daughter, wore an unusually grim expression that day. "Tomasz, don't be so thorough," Hans whispered. "Yesterday, I saw more tanks in the eastern barracks than I could count." Tomasz said nothing, but dug deeper into the farm tools in the truck. He knew these seemingly ordinary plows could be disassembled and reassembled into machine gun mounts, a common infiltration tactic used by the Wehrmacht. At Isaac Goldberg's grocery store on the edge of the village, villagers crowded around, stockpiling supplies. "Give me 10 kilograms of flour and 2 liters of kerosene," Grandpa Merrick slammed money on the counter. "My grandson says the radio's been talking about Germany attacking us." Isaac sighed as he packed the goods. He had just returned from Danzig, where he'd seen German soldiers posting posters declaring, "Danzig belongs to Germany," and Jewish synagogue windows shattered by stones. "I've sent my family to stay with relatives in Warsaw," Isaac whispered to Merrick. "You should leave too, it's too dangerous here." But Merrick shook his head. His son had died in Poland's 1918 War of Independence, and he refused to abandon the land where his son was buried. Meanwhile, at Hitler's headquarters in Rassenburg, East Prussia, Adolf Hitler fumed over his general's operational map. "The 19th Panzer Corps must advance 20 kilometers faster," he snapped, drawing a thick red line over the Danzig Corridor. "I want German flags flying over the Vistula River within 2 weeks." Field Marshal Franz Halder, chief of the Army General Staff, stood nearby, clutching fresh intelligence. Poland had deployed 3 infantry divisions with 40-75 mm anti-tank guns along the Modlin Fortress line. "Mein Führer, the Modlin Fortress might slow our advance," Halder cautioned. "We need more Stuka bombers for support." Hitler waved him off impatiently. "Tell Kesselring's First Air Fleet to be ready. At dawn on September 1, we'll flatten Poland's airfields first." On August 30, William L. Shire, a correspondent for the New York Times, slipped secretly into the German-Polish border region. In his diary, he wrote, "German soldiers are erecting machine gun nests along the barbed wire. The rumble of tank treads echoes through the night. A Polish farmer told me he saw over 100 trucks loaded with soldiers cross from Germany yesterday." Yet British and French newspapers still claim peace remains possible. Shire had no idea that the words he wrote would become invaluable records of the final moments before World War II. By August 30, the 5 German armies deployed along the Polish border had completed their tactical deployment. The Northern Army Group, commanded by Fedor von Bock, included the 3rd and 4th Armies, equipped with 600 tanks, tasked with breaking through the Danzig Corridor. The Southern Army Group, commanded by Gerd von Rundstedt, included the 8th, 10th, and 14th Armies, with 1,200 tanks, focused on attacking Warsaw. The 14th Army, held in reserve in Silesia, stood ready to reinforce either flank. Poland's 10 armies were unevenly distributed, 7 deployed along the western border, and only 3 in the east, with no mechanized units to speak of. This West-heavy, East-light deployment would later leave Poland vulnerable to the Soviet Union's invasion. Blitzkrieg combined land, sea, and air onslaught, destruction at dawn. At 4:30 a.m. on September 1, 1939, at Poznan's military airfield in western Poland, pilot Jan Kowalski had just finished inspecting his PZL.37 Laska bomber. "Today's mission is to reconnoiter German tank units along the border," his squadron leader told the crew. "Stay at altitude and avoid German anti-aircraft fire." At 4:45 a.m., just as Kowalski's plane climbed to 100 meters, a dark swarm of German aircraft appeared in the sky. Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers from the 1st Air Fleet, their dive sirens wailing like a banshee's cry. "Dive! Dive now. Kowalski shouted into the radio, but it was too late. A Stuka's bomb exploded near the runway, and the shockwave tossed his plane violently. On the ground, he saw his comrades' planes engulfed in flames, broken wings and bodies scattered across the tarmac. "Our airfield's gone," his co-pilot whispered, trembling. "What do we do now?" Kowalski gritted his teeth, "Head for Warsaw. We need to report what's happening here to headquarters." At the same time, on the Westerplatte Peninsula outside Danzig Harbor, Captain Henryk Sieczarski, commander of the Polish garrison, stood in a bunker, watching the battleship Schleswig-Holstein in the distance. "All gun positions, target the battleship, range 12,000 meters, Sieczarski ordered, peering through binoculars. "Wait for my command to fire." At 5 a.m., the battleship's main guns erupted in flame. Shells exploded around the bunker, showering dirt and debris like rain. "Fire!" Sieczarski yelled. The peninsula's four 75mm mortars fired simultaneously, but the shells fell hundreds of meters short of the battleship, sending only small sprays of water into the air. "Our shells can't reach them," the mortar team leader cried. "Their main guns have 3 times our range." Sieczarski fell silent. He knew their mission wasn't to defeat the Germans, but to delay them. "Prepare all explosive charges," he said. "If the Germans land, we'll take them down with us." That morning, the Germans launched 3 landing attempts, all repelled by the 200 Polish defenders, who held off a battleship and an infantry battalion with nothing but rifles and mortars. On the ground, Erwin Rommel, commander of the 1st Panzer Division, sat in his command vehicle, watching the Polish defenses ahead. "Order the 1st Tank Regiment to break through the left flank," Rommel told his staff. "Have the 2nd Motorized Infantry Battalion follow up and cut off the Poles' retreat." At 9:30 a.m., 300 Panzer III tanks advanced in formation. Soldiers of the Polish 20th Infantry Division fired their rifles wildly at the tanks, but the bullets bounced harmlessly off the armor. "Throw Molotov cocktails." "Hurry," their company commander shouted. Several soldiers grabbed the incendiary devices and charged, only to be cut down by machine gun fire from the tanks before they could get close. Jan Kowalski, the blacksmith's unit was tasked with defending a bridge. They had laid mines along the approach, but German bombers arrived first. "The bombs destroyed half the bridge," Jan later recalled. "My comrade Adam, he was supposed to get married next month. All that was left of him was one hand, still wearing his wedding ring." By noon, the Polish line had collapsed entirely. Jan and 16 surviving comrades fled into the woods, watching as a column of German tanks rumbled down the highway, their dust cloud blocking out the sun. On September 1 alone, the Wehrmacht deployed 1,970 aircraft, bombing 70 Polish airfields, 30 railway bridges, and 25 arms depots. They destroyed 148 Polish aircraft, 98% of Poland's operational air force. The battleship Schleswig-Holstein fired 48 rounds from its 280mm main guns, destroying 12 Polish bunkers, but failed to breach the Westerplatte defenses. The 19th Panzer Corps, the fastest advancing German unit, pushed 35 kilometers that day and captured 2,000 Polish soldiers. Diplomatic dilemma, Britain and France's hesitation, between promise and betrayal. At 10 a.m. on September 1, the chamber of the British House of Commons was thick with a leaden atmosphere. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, dressed in a dark suit, clutched the distress telegram from the Polish ambassador so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The words on the telegram danced repeatedly before his eyes: "German forces have breached the Danzig Corridor defenses, the port of Gdynia has fallen, western Warsaw is under continuous bombardment. Request immediate air support from the Allies." Hardly had Chamberlain begun his speech when Clement Attlee, a Labour MP, shot up from his seat, his voice trembling with barely contained anger. "Mr. Prime Minister. 3 months ago, you held up the Munich Agreement and claimed it secured peace for a generation. Now Poland is bleeding. What exactly do you mean by necessary measures? Are we to let the Poles face German tanks alone? Attlee's accusation sparked an uproar. Most Conservative MPs hung their heads in silence, while Liberal MPs raised their hands in succession, clamoring to speak. The noise in the chamber nearly drowned out the Speaker's gavel. Meanwhile, in the cabinet meeting at the Élysée Palace in Paris, French Prime Minister Édouard Daladier stared blankly at the European map on the wall. Marshal Maurice Gamelin, Commander-in-Chief of the French Army, pointed his baton at the Maginot Line along the Franco-German border. We have deployed 4,000 artillery pieces and 1.12 million soldiers along the line. If the Germans dare attack the Western Front, we can hold out for at least 6 months. But Poland is too far. Our mechanized units would take at least 3 weeks to reach Poland via Belgium and the Netherlands. By the time we arrive, Poland will likely have fallen. But we have an alliance treaty with Poland. Minister of Defense Paul Reynaud slammed his fist on the table. If we fail to aid Poland now, who will ever trust France's promises again? Germany will attack us next. Foreign Minister Georges Bonnet shook his head in rebuttal. We should wait for Britain to act first. Their Royal Air Force is stronger than ours, they should send planes to support Poland first. The argument dragged on from morning till evening, and finally Daladier made a decision. First, issue an ultimatum to Germany, demanding their withdrawal within 48 hours. At the same time, order the Fourth Army to advance into Germany's Saar region. Just put on a show, don't actually engage the German troops. At 11 a.m. on September 3, Britain formally declared war on Germany. There was no cheering on the streets of London, only pedestrians hurrying past and newspapers emblazoned with bold headlines, "War breaks out." 12 Spitfire fighters from No. 11 Group of the Royal Air Force took off from their base. The pilots thought they were heading to support Poland, but received orders instead, patrol the waters off southern Britain to prevent German air raids on the homeland. Meanwhile, Polish Ambassador Edward Raczynski met with Chamberlain at 10 Downing Street. "Mr. Prime Minister, when will British planes arrive in Poland?" he asked urgently. Chamberlain avoided his gaze and mumbled, "We need to defend our homeland first, we'll discuss support later." On September 7, the French Fourth Army finally crossed the Franco-German border and launched an attack on the Saar region. Soldier Pierre Dupont wrote in his diary, "We advanced 5 kilometers and occupied a small German village. The Germans there stared at us like we were monsters, no resistance, no welcome. Our officer said we completed our mission and ordered a withdrawal back to France. Later, I realized it was all just a show for the Poles." In September 1939, the British Army had a total strength of 380,000 men, of whom only 100,000 had received full combat training, with fewer than 500 anti-tank guns. Although the French army had 1.12 million soldiers, it had only 6 mechanized divisions, most of which were equipped with light tanks with a speed of less than 20 km per hour. The Anglo-French Allied forces deployed 1,200 aircraft on the Western Front, but only 50 were sent on reconnaissance missions. No air raids were launched against Germany's homeland or German troops in Poland. Archives from the Polish government in exile later showed that Poland sent 28 aid requests to Britain and France in the early stages of World War II, receiving only 3 verbal replies promising support soon. The defense of Warsaw, a nation's resistance, the courage of an isolated city. On the morning of September 8, a light drizzle fell over Warsaw. Anna Woolska splashed through puddles to reach the Cathedral of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary, now converted into a field hospital. The cathedral's stained-glass windows had been shattered by artillery fire, and sunlight streamed through the gaps onto blood-stained pews. Head nurse Maria called out names from a list. "Anna, you're in charge of the 3rd Ward. There are many soldiers evacuated from the Western Front, they need their bandages changed and water given." As Anna walked to the 3rd Ward, she spotted a familiar face, 17-year-old Tomasz, a student at the University of Warsaw who had attended her sketching class at the Academy of Fine Arts before the war. Tomasz had a shrapnel wound to his right leg, wrapped in thick bandages, yet he was still helping nurses pass gauze. "What are you doing here?" Anna asked in surprise. Tomasz smiled, "I joined the militia. I got injured fighting the Germans in the old town square yesterday." As soon as my leg heals, I'm going back to fight. Meanwhile, General Władysław Bortnowski, commander of the Warsaw garrison, was holding an emergency meeting at his headquarters. On the map, red arrows closed in on Warsaw from all directions. The German 8th and 10th armies were forming an encirclement. We only have 22,000 regular troops left, Bortnowski pointed to the map. But Warsaw has 1.2 million citizens, they are all our reinforcements. I've ordered factories to stop producing civilian goods and focus on making hand grenades and Molotov cocktails. I've told citizens to move beds, cabinets, and furniture into the streets to build barricades. I've asked children to help us deliver messages. We will turn Warsaw into a graveyard for German troops. That afternoon, the hum of machinery filled Warsaw's factories. At the Warsaw Steelworks, worker Stanislav and his colleagues were making hand grenades. We don't have molds, so we use tin cans as casings, fill them with gunpowder and nails, then add fuses. They're crude, but they can injure German soldiers. Stanislav's wife and daughter weren't idle either. They joined other women in soaking cloth strips in gasoline to make Molotov cocktails, producing over 300 a day. My husband says these Molotov cocktails can burn German tanks, Stanislav's wife said. The more I make, the safer he'll be. On September 10, German forces launched their third attack on the Old Town Square. Polish militiaman Jan Kozak and 5 comrades defended the rooftop of a 3-story building. They had only 10 bullets left for their rifles, most of their weapons were homemade hand grenades. German tanks are coming, the lookout shouted. Kozak told his comrades to get the Molotov cocktails ready. A German Panzer IV tank rumbled forward, its turret machine gun firing non-stop, bullets sparked off the walls. Throw! Kozak yelled. 3 Molotov cocktails hit the tank's engine hood at once, and flames erupted instantly. German soldiers scrambled out of the tank, only to be shot by the militiamen as soon as they hit the ground. Hurry, German infantry are moving in. Kozak had barely finished speaking when he heard footsteps downstairs. He told his comrades to throw hand grenades down the staircase, while he lay on the edge of the rooftop, firing his rifle. Suddenly, a bullet grazed his arm, and blood poured out immediately. You're injured, a comrade tried to bandage him, but Kozak shook his head, leave me, keep fighting. Every minute we hold on gives Warsaw one more minute of hope. By September 12, the defense of Warsaw had mobilized a total of 40,000 troops, including 22,000 regular soldiers and 18,000 militiamen, equipped with 80 mortars, 200 heavy machine guns, and 500 anti-tank rifles. Warsaw citizens donated 500 tons of grain, 20 tons of medical supplies, and 100,000 items of clothing. 20,000 women joined the Red Cross to care for the wounded and make bandages. 5,000 children aged 10 to 16 formed youth scout teams to deliver messages and ammunition between German blockades. Over 300 of these children were captured or killed by German troops while on missions. The Eastern Shadow, the Soviet Union's choice, a calculated opportunistic strike. On September 10, in the underground conference room of the Kremlin in Moscow, Stalin held an intelligence report in his hand, a faint sneer playing at the corner of his mouth. The report read, German forces have occupied Poznan, Lodz, and other cities in western Poland. The main Polish army is besieged near Warsaw, with only 250,000 troops left on the Eastern Front, lacking ammunition and supplies. The time has come, Stalin placed the report on the table and said to Molotov and Voroshilov, according to the secret provisions of the Treaty of Non-Aggression between Germany and the Soviet Union, Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, the 192,000 square kilometers of eastern Poland fall within our sphere of influence. Now that the Germans have drawn Poland's main forces to the west, we can send troops to occupy the east under the pretext of liberating Ukrainian and Belarusian compatriots in eastern Poland. This way, we avoid conflict with Germany while expanding our territory. Marshal Voroshilov looked concerned. Although the Polish defenders in the east are weak, they might still resist our attack. How many troops do we need? Stalin thought for a moment and replied, deploy 4 field armies, 600,000 troops, equipped with 1,500 tanks and 1,000 aircraft. That's more than enough. The Poles don't have the strength to resist such a powerful force. Molotov added, we also need the Foreign Ministry to issue a statement, claiming we are protecting the people of Eastern Poland from Nazi persecution, so that the world sees us as just. On September 15, the Third Army of the Soviet Red Army gathered along the border near Lviv in Ukraine. Private Ivan Petrov was checking his rifle when he asked his squad leader, "Are we going to fight? Who are we fighting?" The squad leader shook his head, "I don't know." The officers said, "We're going to liberate a place, and the people there are waiting for us." That afternoon, Red Army tanks and trucks formed a long line along the highway, advancing toward the Polish border. Ukrainian villagers in the area, thinking the Red Army had come to help them fight the Germans, lined the roads with bread and eggs to welcome them. At 3 a.m. on September 17, the Red Army crossed the German-Polish border and launched an attack on Lviv, a major city in eastern Poland. General Stanislaw Skrzypczynski, commander of the 21st Infantry Division of the Polish Eastern Defense Forces, was having breakfast with his soldiers when he received the report. "The Soviets have betrayed us." Skrzypczynski angrily smashed his bowl on the ground. "We haven't declared war on them, why are they attacking us?" He immediately ordered resistance, but his soldiers had little ammunition left, many only had old-fashioned rifles, which stood no chance against the Red Army's tanks. Maria Nowak, a nurse and resident of Lviv, was at home taking care of her sick daughter when she suddenly heard gunfire outside. She walked to the window and saw Red Army soldiers patrolling the streets, with posters reading, "The Soviet Red Army liberates Eastern Poland," pasted on the walls. "Mom, who are those soldiers?" her daughter asked fearfully. Maria held her daughter in her arms and whispered, "They're here to protect us. Don't be scared." But she knew the truth. By that afternoon, Red Army soldiers had broken into her neighbor's house. The neighbor, an official of the Polish government, was taken away and never seen again. From September 17 to 20, 1939, the Soviet Red Army deployed 4 field armies, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 10th Armies, totaling 600,000 troops, equipped with 1,500 tanks and 1,000 aircraft, advancing into eastern Poland in 3 prongs. The Polish Eastern Defense Forces had 3 field armies, the 2nd, 10th, and 12th Armies, with 250,000 troops. Most of their tanks were obsolete models from World War I, and they had fewer than 100 anti-tank guns. They only resisted for 3 days before collapsing completely. 200,000 were captured and 50,000 scattered. The Red Army suffered 1,500 casualties during the offensive, mostly from sporadic resistance by Polish forces and traffic accidents. The Siege of Warsaw, desperate resistance, 20 days of starvation and ammunition shortage. On the morning of September 15, a thin mist hung over Warsaw's old town. Anna Wulska, her medical kit half empty, wove through the ruins. The night before, German heavy artillery had destroyed the Red Cross supply warehouse, leaving only enough bandages and iodine to last 3 days. "Sister, Tomasha's wound is festering." Anna knelt in the corner of the makeshift ward, her voice trembling. "We have no antibiotics, we can only clean it with salt water, but his fever keeps rising." 17-year-old Tomasz lay on the stone steps of the church, his face as pale as paper. A physics student at the University of Warsaw, he had been preparing for his midterm exams before the war. Now, his right leg was swollen and shiny from infection. "Sister Anna, will I live to see Warsaw liberated?" Tomasz weakly grasped Anna's hand. "My mom is still on the farm in the suburbs. I want to go back and tell her I didn't let her down." Anna held back her tears and nodded, "Yes, we'll all live to see that day." But she knew the truth. Warsaw's food supplies were nearly exhausted. Since September 12, the daily ration for civilians had been cut from 500 grams of black bread to 200 grams, and even the wounded only got an extra spoonful of thin porridge. At noon that day, the Germans launched another full-scale attack on the old town. More than 150 mm heavy artillery pieces fired simultaneously, and shells rained down on the streets, reducing already damaged buildings to piles of rubble. Jan Kozak, a Polish militia member, and 5 of his comrades defended a 3-story building. They had little ammunition left, only 10 rifle rounds per person, with the rest being handmade grenades. "The German tanks are coming," the lookout shouted. Kozak immediately told his comrades to bring the Molotov cocktails to the windows. These simple weapons, made with vodka and cotton cloth, were their only defense against the tanks. A German Panzer IV tank rumbled forward, its turret machine gun firing non-stop. "Throw!" Kozak yelled. 3 Molotov cocktails hit the tank's tracks and engine cover at the same time, and flames erupted instantly. German soldiers scrambled out of the tank's hatch, only to be shot down by the militia's rifles. "We took out another one," the comrades cheered, but Kozak couldn't smile. They had used up all their Molotov cocktails for the day, and in the distance, more German tanks were gathering. In the evening, General Władysław Bortnowski, Warsaw's commander-in-chief, received desperate news. The Red Army had occupied Lviv and Vilnius in the east, and the Polish government had fled to Romania. No reinforcements would ever come. "We are now fighting alone," Bortnowski said over the radio, "but as long as there is one person left in Warsaw, the resistance will not stop." His words spread across the city via radio, and many civilians who had given up hope picked up weapons again. A 70-year-old man stood guard at his door with a rusty shotgun, saying he wanted to avenge his son. A group of teenage boys formed a youth reconnaissance team, sneaking through German blockades to deliver messages. By September 18, Warsaw's defenders had only 15% of their initial ammunition left, fewer than 100,000 rifle rounds, 8,000 hand grenades, and almost no Molotov cocktails left. Food supplies could only last 5 days, including 30 tons of black bread and 20 tons of potatoes. Protein for the wounded relied entirely on 5,000 eggs donated by civilians. Medical supplies were 80% short, bandages were replaced with old bed sheets, disinfectant was diluted with alcohol, and 30% of the wounded died from infection. On the German side, they had lost 87 tanks, 34 aircraft, 3,800 killed, and 12,200 wounded, but still had 120,000 troops and 200 tanks ready for deployment. The Eastern Iron Curtain suffering in Soviet-occupied territories, the forgotten exile. On September 20, 1939, Maria Nowak, a resident of Lviv, huddled in her cellar, listening to the sound of Soviet soldiers' footsteps outside. Her husband Jan, a lieutenant in the Polish army, had been captured by Soviet troops since September 17, and there had been no news of him since. "Is anyone home? Open up for inspection." A loud knock came from the door. Maria forced herself to calm down and opened the door. 2 Soviet soldiers stood at the threshold, holding a list and asking if there were Polish government officials or military officers in the house. "My husband is a farmer, not an officer," Maria lied. But the soldiers rummaged through the house and found Jan's military ID hidden in a wooden box. "You're lying," one soldier snapped. "He's a Polish lieutenant, he must come with us." Maria lunged forward to grab the ID, only to be pushed to the ground. She watched as the soldiers took Jan's photos and medals away, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know that this would be the last time she saw her husband's belongings. Jan was later sent to a prisoner-of-war camp in Siberia and died of typhus in 1941. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union began implementing a policy of Sovietization in the eastern occupied territories. All Polish-language schools were closed, and classes were taught in Russian or Ukrainian instead. Land owned by Polish landlords was confiscated and redistributed to local Ukrainian and Belarusian farmers. People's courts were established to try so-called Polish reactionaries. Isaac Goldberg, a Jewish merchant in Lviv, had initially hoped the Soviets would be more lenient than the Germans, but his grocery store was seized for exploiting the working people, nonetheless. "I've run this store since I was 16, and now I have nothing left," Isaac sighed. "They told me to work on a collective farm, but I don't know how to farm at all." On October 5, the Soviet Union launched a large-scale deportation of Poles. In Vilnius, soldiers went door to door, ordering residents to pack their bags and head to new homes in Siberia within 24 hours. We had no idea where we were going or how long we'd be gone, a Polish teacher who was deported recalled. The trains were packed with people, no seats, no food. Many elderly people and children got sick along the way. Most of these deported Poles were sent to logging camps and mines in Siberia, where they worked 12 hours a day. Their only rations were black bread and thin soup, and many died from cold and starvation. From September 1939 to June 1941, the Soviet Union carried out 3 major waves of deportations of Poles. The first, November-December 1939, deported 201,000 people, mainly Polish officers, government officials, and landlords. The second, February-March 1940, deported 139,000 people, mostly intellectuals and merchants. The third, May 1941, deported 38,000 people, primarily farmers and craftsmen. In total, 378,000 Poles were deported, and approximately 100,000 died during the journey or in exile, according to the declassified 2008 Soviet Ministry of Internal Affairs document records of Polish civilian deportations. In April 1940, the Soviet Union executed 21,857 Polish elites, including officers, teachers, doctors, and engineers, in the Katyn Forest, an atrocity known as the Katyn Massacre, that shocked the world. After surrender, the dawn of suffering, concentration camps and occupation rule. On the afternoon of September 27, Jan Kowalski, the blacksmith, was captured by German troops in a basement in Warsaw's Old Town. He and over 200 other prisoners of war were herded into a square, where German soldiers pointed their guns at them and shouted, "Polish pigs! Hand over your weapons," a German officer yelled. Jan instinctively touched the sole of his shoe. His father's Independence Medal was hidden there, his only remaining memento. The prisoners were herded onto trains and taken to the Majdanek concentration camp on the outskirts of Warsaw. Originally a Polish military barracks, it had been converted into a camp for detaining Poles by the Germans. We had to get up at 5 a.m. every morning, run 3 kilometers, then carry stones, Jan recalled. We only got a piece of black bread for lunch and thin, watery soup for dinner. If we moved too slowly, we'd be whipped by the guards. Conditions in the camp were abysmal. There were no beds, so POWs slept on the ground, no proper toilets, so they had to relieve themselves in corners. Many died from malnutrition and disease, and trucks came every day to haul the bodies away for burial. Meanwhile, the Germans began implementing a policy of ethnic cleansing in western Poland. Poles were only allowed to do manual labor, forbidden from receiving education, and even prohibited from speaking Polish. Jews and Roma were herded into ghettos, destined for extermination camps later. In Danzig, German troops closed all synagogues, forced Jews to wear yellow stars of David, and looted their property. My uncle was a doctor, a Jewish survivor remembered. He refused to wear the star, so German soldiers shot him dead. They left his body on the street to warn others not to resist. On October 1, the Germans established the general government in Warsaw, with Hans Frank as governor. Frank declared, "Poles are an inferior race, they exist only to serve Germans." The Germans began plundering Poland's resources on a large scale. Factory machines were dismantled and shipped to Germany, grain from farms was seized, and even copper bells from churches were melted down to make artillery shells. Anna Wulska, a Warsaw civilian, was arrested by the Germans for helping Jews. "They beat me and asked for the names of others who were helping Jews," Anna said. "But I didn't say anything, I knew that if I did, more people would die." By December 1939, the Germans had established 12 concentration camps in Poland, detaining approximately 150,000 Polish POWs and civilians. The Majdanek concentration camp alone held 32,000 people, with a mortality rate of 25%. In western Poland, the Germans plundered 1.2 million tons of grain, 5 million tons of coal, and 300,000 tons of steel. They dismantled over 2,000 pieces of factory equipment, causing Poland's industrial output to drop by 70% and agricultural production to fall by 40%. Exile and resistance, the unquenchable Polish spirit overseas. In June 1940, at a Polish exile military training camp on the outskirts of Paris, France, 19-year-old Tomasz, the young soldier from the Warsaw Uprising, was undergoing shooting training. After the fall of Warsaw, he had fled to Romania and then made his way to France, joining the military formed by the Polish government in exile. "I want to avenge my fallen comrades and my country," Tomasz said. "As long as I have a breath left, I will never give up fighting." By this time, the Polish government in exile had been established in London, with the Ladislaw Sikorski serving as prime minister. Recognized by Britain and France, its goal was to liberate Poland and restore national independence. The exile military had a total of 40,000 soldiers, divided into the Army, Air Force, and Navy. The Army was equipped with rifles and machine guns provided by Britain, while the Air Force flew Spitfire fighters supplied by the British. "Although our equipment is not as good as that of the German Army, we have faith," said General Władysław Anders, commander of the exile military. "We want the world to know that Poland is not dead." In May 1940, when Germany invaded France, the Polish exile military participated in the Battle of the Somme. Tomasz's company was tasked with defending a small village, facing a German panzer division. "When the German tanks charged, we fired with anti-tank rifles, but they couldn't penetrate the tank's armor at all," Tomasz recalled. "We had to hide in the trenches and attack the infantry behind the tanks only after the tanks had passed." The battle lasted for 3 days, and the Polish military suffered heavy casualties, but they successfully delayed the German advance and bought time for the Allied retreat. In May 1944, the Polish II Corps, reorganized from the exile military, participated in the Battle of Monte Cassino on the Italian front. It was an extremely brutal battle. The German army had built solid defensive fortifications on Monte Cassino and even converted a monastery into a firepower stronghold. "We had to climb up the hillside, dodging German machine guns and mortars," Tomasz said. "Many comrades were shot as soon as they climbed up and rolled down the cliff." After 7 days of fierce fighting, the Polish military finally captured the Monte Cassino monastery, breaking open a gap in the German Gustav Line for the Allies. "We did it!" Tomasz and his comrades cheered, raising the Polish flag over the ruins of the monastery, one of the most brilliant victories of the Polish exile military in World War II. During World War II, the Polish exile military had approximately 200,000 soldiers, participating in major campaigns such as the Battle of France, the North African Campaign, the Italian Campaign, and the Normandy landings, with a total of 80,000 casualties. In the 1944 Battle of Monte Cassino, the Polish II Corps suffered 4,000 casualties, including 1,200 deaths. Their heroic performance was highly praised by the Allies, and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill called them the brave Polish soldiers. Remembrance and inheritance, the echoes of history, guardians of peace. On September 1, 2023, the Warsaw Uprising Monument in downtown Warsaw was crowded with people coming to pay tribute. 85-year-old Marek Kowalski, grandson of Jan Kowalski, stood in front of the monument, holding his grandfather's Independence Medal in his hands. "Grandpa told me that this medal was earned by his father with his life, and it was also his hope to survive in the concentration camp," Marek said. "I come here every year to tell Grandpa that we have not forgotten history, and we have guarded peace." In the Warsaw World War II Museum, the manuscript of Anna Woolska's diary was placed in the most prominent display case. Every page of the diary recorded the hardships and courage of the Warsaw Uprising, with one sentence circled in red: "Even if the world is dark, we must believe that light will come eventually." "Every day, many people come to visit, especially young people," said Katarzyna Kowalski, the museum director. "They read the diary carefully, and some even write down their feelings. This makes me feel that history has not been forgotten." In Berlin, Germany, the German chancellor stood in front of the Polish embassy and bowed deeply to the Polish people. On September 1, 1939, Germany launched an aggressive war against Poland, bringing enormous suffering to the Polish people, the Chancellor said. We will never forget this history, and we will never repeat the mistakes of the past. We will continue to maintain friendly relations with Poland and jointly guard peace in Europe. This apology has become a regular annual event in Germany and an important foundation for reconciliation between Germany and Poland. In Polish schools, history teachers take students to visit the Majdanek concentration camp and the Katyn Forest Memorial. We want students to know that during World War II, Poland lost 6 million compatriots, and behind every number is a vivid life, said Anna Nowak, a teacher. We want them to remember the cruelty of war and cherish the peace we have now, because peace is not taken for granted and requires every one of us to guard it. Poland in September 1939 was not only the starting point of World War II but also humanity's first resistance against fascist atrocities. From the artillery fire in the Danzig Corridor to the ruins of Warsaw's Old Town, from the hardships of the Majdanek concentration camp to the victory at Monte Cassino, the Polish people used their blood and lives to interpret what courage and perseverance mean. This history tells us, to forget history is to betray the future. Only by remembering the hardships of the past can we cherish the peace of the present and prevent war from recurring. May we always remember September 1939, remember those who sacrificed for freedom and peace, and jointly guard a world free from war and suffering.